I was overseas when Tess was diagnosed, and out of the blue I got a telephone call from Dad, and he said, Raph, Tess, she's had a mole removed from her back. They've tested it and it's melanoma, and they're giving her less than 12 months to live. Tess is one of my 7 siblings, so I'm the 3rd eldest, and Tess is 18 months older than me. Tess was quite a spiritual person and also funny. She was very funny. She was a lover of the arts, which we discovered later on in her teenage years, when she just loved performing, whether it was at home, after watching a movie, with friends in the playground. I often hear stories from the friends that she went to school with about how she would keep them all entertained in class. So we were very close. We were very close. Tess was someone that I could go to and speak about girlfriends, and we both also shared a love of music. I was just in a state of disbelief when I was first told the news. I just couldn't quite come to terms that Tess, someone who I'd just seen a couple months earlier, had ultimately been given a death sentence. She'd been given a time, and she was 5 months pregnant at the time when she had her mole removed, and she didn't even consider treatment. She was married a year prior, and her husband, when I've spoken to him at length in the last few years, he said that it wasn't even considered. They just wanted to make sure that the baby's health came first. They concentrated on resting, keeping as healthy as possible, and then once their daughter was born, Mabel, then they realised that the cancer had started to accelerate. Tess absolutely loved being a mother. It really was her calling, and it was wonderful that she had all those months with Mabel. It was difficult in the first few months when Tess started undergoing some treatment, because she was in and out of sleep, and as soon as she would wake up, the first question was, what's Mabel doing? Where is she? So we made sure that Mabel was always around when she woke up. So as a family, when we found out the news about Tess, we all relocated. I came down from the Sunshine Coast. I had family move from Townsville, from Perth, and also Wagga. And as family, that comes first for us. So once we were all here, it was important that every single day someone was with Tess and that she was never alone, whether she was going to treatment, whether she was at home. And those first 4 months when I moved down to Sydney, it was a special time because I moved in with her husband, baby Mabel and Tess, and I just wanted to be a part of those first 4 months and be on hand. My role during Tess's treatment was to be myself, to be positive, to smile when I could, and organise. That's a strength that I have. And we kept a communication diary that whenever we were changing shifts, if that's what you wanted to call it, we would make sure that we record how Tess was, whether she was in pain, what doctors, because everyone was wanting to know the facts. So when Tess passed away that night, it was fortunate that we were all around her bed, and I'd describe it as beautiful. She was at peace, and it was a moment that I'll always remember, but I'll remember not so much the pain, but more the beauty of who Tess was, and that hasn't faded at all. In the years that she's passed, she is constantly popping up throughout my day. I've got a lot to thank her for, and a neck chain with her thumbprint on it, which I touch throughout the day, just to remember her. So what I'm doing in memory of Tess is something which I feel very fortunate to do, because it keeps her memory alive, and I mention her name every single day. I packed up from Sydney 2 years ago and moved up to the Sunshine Coast because the time had come where I'd worked on a couple of product ideas to solve problems which I'd noticed to do with sunscreen and people outdoors. I found that people, when using sunscreen, they didn't want it on their hands. And the other problem I found was that people couldn't reach their back to apply. And what they were doing was just not applying it. And I wanted to create a product, which I've called bakslap, to solve those two problems and keep people protected using sunscreen when outdoors. So now that I'm living on the Sunshine Coast, I won't need to travel down to Sydney this year for the Melanoma March. I've decided to host a Melanoma March in my hometown. It gets a lot of tourists, there's a lot of sunshine, and it's an important message that I want to be able to share with the community on the Sunshine Coast. Tess, she's with me every day, and that's driving me to do what I can to be a part of the change we're trying to create around melanoma. So when Mabel and other kids grow up, their generation, it's free from melanoma.